I'm going to show you how to improve your language skills by 194%. Because if you're putting in 20 minutes a day of study right now, there's a good chance you're wasting almost all of that time. You see, after learning 8 languages and helping thousands of students get fluent, I have seen the same thing over and over. Frustrated learners grinding away for years while experienced learners are doing something completely different and nobody is telling them what it is. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 specific things experienced learners do completely differently and how you can start doing those things today, no matter what language you're learning or what level you are at. But first, you need to see where it's all been going so badly wrong.
Bonjour, j'aimerais voir un film.
Bonjour, oui, vous voulez mater quoi comme film alors? Vous voulez mater quoi comme film alors?
Pardon?
Yeah, that's pretty common, I'm afraid. I can spot a stuck learner like this guy in about 10 seconds, and it's always the same story. You've got an app streak that you're really proud of and can say, the boy eats the apple, without even looking. You've done a few grammar exercises this week. You've even got a notebook full of useful words, most of which you can't remember, and you're putting in the time. That's the painful part. You're genuinely trying, but if someone walked up to you right now and spoke the language at normal speed, you would just stand there and blink. I know, because that was me. Back in my 20s, I'd been learning Spanish in London. Textbooks, grammar drills, obsessing over perfect sentences, you know how it is. I genuinely thought that I was getting somewhere, but then I went to Madrid for a trip with a friend, and then first night out, it was amazing, live music, everyone chatting, but I understood almost nothing. My friend spent the whole evening translating for me in English while I just sat there smiling and nodding like an absolute muppet. It was so humiliating. It took me a while and a few more languages to figure out what I'd been doing wrong. And it turns out every single time I ended up banging my head against a wall, I'd been making the exact same study mistakes. Meanwhile, people who are actually good at languages do something else entirely. The first one sounds so lazy, you'd never believe it works, and every experienced learner that I know does this, but it means throwing out the one habit you're most proud of. See, most people, when they decide to learn a language, immediately switch into school mode. They sit down and think, right, let's learn something today. They add more vocabulary or they learn more grammar and they make a new list and they try to hammer it into their brain, and it feels very serious and studious and very productive, and after 15 minutes you go, great, I studied, I'm learning. Except you're not really. And because it feels too much like school, your brain files everything under things I'm being tested on and promptly forgets most of it by Thursday. But what the pros do instead is they don't think about study time at all. They think about contact time, as in contact with the real spoken language, because pros understand that you learn from exposure and meaningful immersion, not from arbitrary study. When I started learning Portuguese, there was no big strategy. I was living in the UK, I was studying jazz piano, and I'd made this group of Brazilian friends. They were always playing music. It was so cool. Bossa Nova, samba, and I just wanted parts of it. I wanted to be part of that. So I picked up a guitar, I printed out the lyrics in these tab things, and I started playing and singing along, just figuring it out as I went along. I absolutely butchered it, especially the pronunciation. Didn't understand half or even most of what I was singing, but I just loved the music, and so I kept going. I kept listening. I kept figuring it out, and without planning anything, I was suddenly spending a lot of hours every week in contact with real Portuguese. Not exercises about Portuguese or grammar books, but the language itself. The voices, the rhythm, the melody, whole lines and expressions just getting stuck in my head because I heard them so many times and I sang them and I tried them out on people. Now today, fast forward 25 years, Brazilian Portuguese is one of my strongest languages, and this comes from the fact that it was already woven into my life well before I ever got on a plane and spent time in Brazil. Problem is, doing it in this way seems so counterintuitive, most people would never even think about it. So here's the first thing you need to do. Get out of study mode and into contact mode. Rather than thinking, I'm going to study my textbook for 15 minutes, think, I'm going to get 15 minutes of meaningful input in the language, which can be any kind of listening or reading. A podcast about something that you're interested in, travel stories, news in slow Spanish, whatever. A YouTube video on a topic that you would be interested in English even. A chapter of a book pitched at your level, not too easy, not too hard, just interesting enough to keep you turning the pages. I wrote my books for this exact purpose, and you can get the audio to go along with them as well, which makes the study time even more effective. And look, you don't even have to understand all of it. That's fine. As long as you can swap 15 minutes of your daily study time for this kind of meaningful exposure, I guarantee you're going to see huge improvements. And it won't happen overnight. It won't happen on day one, certainly not. But give it a few months and the difference will be incredible. Now, what I'm giving you here is a way to make every bit of time that you spend on your language count. But let's not kid ourselves. Knowing what to do and actually doing it are two very different things, and that's why I made something very handy to keep you on track. It's called the Language Goal Planner, and it's the exact system that I use to make sure that my own language practice actually happens. It's simple on purpose. It's 2 pages. You can print it out, takes a couple of minutes to set up, and it gets 3 things crystal clear. Where you are right now, where you want to be in 90 days, and exactly what you plan to do to get there. You can track every session, see where you're showing up, and the things that you might also be avoiding. It's completely free. You can scan the QR code on the screen or grab the link below in the description. Which brings me to the habit that people are most terrified of. It's the one thing that every pro does from week 1 that most beginners put off for way too long, sometimes for years. I used to put this off as well until my stubbornness forced me to realize the error of my ways. And the language learners who figure this out early skip an entire phase of suffering the rest of us put ourselves through. I'm talking about speaking. It blows my mind how most learners treat speaking like some kind of final stage where they should be doing it right from the start. Now, tell me if this sounds familiar. You decide to build up some proper knowledge of the language first. You tidy up your grammar, collect some more vocabulary so you won't embarrass yourself, and then when you finally feel confident, whenever that is, you'll start speaking. That's when you'll book your trip. That's when you'll find a language partner. I mean, it sounds sensible, doesn't it? But it's not. And I know this not just from my own shenanigans, but pretty much the whole language learning community. In the beginning, they're like, oh, once I've got enough words and I can string a decent sentence together in my head, then I will be ready, then I will start speaking. But of course, that moment never arrives. There's always one more verb table. There's always something you're still not confident about. One more reason to wait. And so people prepare to speak for years and never actually do it. And I'll tell you what drove this home for me. Many years ago, I was doing a project to learn Italian, and I said to myself, right, I want to be conversationally fluent within 90 days. And I knew that if I wanted to stand a chance of actually being fluent in 90 days, I needed to be speaking for most of that. And not just speaking as in, let's practice this thing from the textbook, but speaking as in like an hour of actually speaking with an Italian person every single day. So I didn't do it from week 1, but after the first month, this was week 5, even though I was nowhere near ready to start having a conversation, I actually booked a lesson with an Italian tutor and I started speaking, even though I wasn't ready, and I recorded it for posterity. Here it was.
Sì, perché nunca dovevo scriverlo prima.
So as you can see, lots of problems, more Spanish than Italian coming out, but it felt great. And this was me just 3 weeks later.
Ho parlato con mia amica Lucia il lunedì e con te oggi. In realtà questa settimana scorsa è stata un po' bruta.
And the improvement that's tangible here is not a result of me studying more, it's a result of me actually speaking and wrapping my head around the words and my tongue around the sounds and all of these things. It's by doing it that you actually get better. You do not learn to speak by studying. You learn to speak by speaking. And it may sound obvious when you say it like that, but almost nobody does it. So the one thing you can do this week is to find someone who you can actually practice speaking with regularly. This can be with a language exchange partner where you spend time in both languages, or it can be with a tutor whose job it is to actually speak with you, not to teach you. You can use an AI app if you want at a push. But honestly, a human is probably better so that you can actually get used to the nerves that come along with this, you know, the awkwardness, the emotion, the, oh, damn it, what's the word? That panic. That's where the learning actually lives. Then aim for at least 1 session a week, ideally 2 or 3, but at least 1 where you just speak. And you do it whether you feel ready or not. That little voice inside you that's starting to panic, you feel that, but you do it anyway, even if you've only been learning for a month, even if the thought makes your stomach churn. And yes, it's gonna be messy. You're gonna forget words. You'll accidentally ask the waiter for a nosebleed instead of a coffee.
I've been into Starbucks actually and been like, "Copy 주세요?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Copy?" If you say copy, that means nosebleed. Copy 주세요?
It's fine. You'll probably never make that mistake again, hopefully. But if you want to be certain, there's a third thing that the pros are doing that will flip all that awkwardness around. See, there's a reason that people find vocabulary so hard. They learn all these words and they just never stick, or else when they do speak, they end up sticking words together that really don't make sense. And the fix is so obvious, yet almost nobody does it. And it goes back to those Portuguese songs that I was butchering back in London. So you know that thing where you hit a word you don't understand in a sentence, right? And you get this tiny flicker of panic. So you grab your phone, you look it up and write it down, 1 word into that notebook, onto the flashcard. Good job. Except That word, it doesn't stick. That we all know that our notebooks are laying around our house full of words we've written down and never actually learned. That's the reality. Why pretend it's anything but that? You learn it Monday, it's gone. By Wednesday, you see it a month later and you think, oh, I definitely know that word from somewhere, but then nothing. Because it's got no home. That word has no context. It's just floating in space like a lost astronaut. But experienced language learners do something dead simple instead. They tend not to learn single words on their own. They learn them inside a sentence or a phrase that they originally found that word in. So instead of writing down caro, which means expensive in Portuguese, you write it how it actually showed up. É muito caro. It's very expensive. And you use it as a question to é muito caro. Now, your word is not homeless anymore. It's got neighbors, it's got rhythm, it's got a situation attached to it. And guess which version your brain holds on to? Yep, that's right. This works because language never lives as single words. It lives in full sentences, in real things that people say. And when you learn words that way, something brilliant starts to happen. You stop translating word by word and you start thinking in whole pieces, whole constructs of language. These chunks of language, these constructs, they don't change themselves. All you do is you swap individual components out. That's how native speakers actually work, right? So if you use a phrase like, by the way, in English, you're not thinking about those three words when you say that, like, by the. There's no mental gymnastics going on here. You just learn the whole phrase, which, by the way, is a very handy shortcut, and every language has them. And seriously, full phrases are not even that hard to learn, especially when they come from something real, like a line you've already heard 17 times in real life. So next time you meet a word that you don't know, don't isolate it, keep it inside the sentence you found it in. Now, at this point, you've basically got two options. You can keep chugging along the old way, studying harder and improving maybe 10% every few months, or you can flip these three switches. Stop studying and start immersing, speak before you feel ready, and learn a language in whole chunks, not loose words. If you do that, and the gap between where you are now and where you could be in a couple of months gets very, very interesting. And if you want help putting that all into action, grab the goal planner that I mentioned earlier to map things out. But there's one small problem. All of this only works if you actually show up every day, right? So how do you make real progress if you've only got, say, 15 minutes a day? Well, that's exactly what I figured out. So go watch this video next and I'll show you exactly how it works.